Well, it gives me a great pleasure to be here this evening with you. I've attended one of these, but I've never presented, so I ask for your indulgence as I learn to do this well. And my presentation this evening is all about getting you to consider the impact that you can make in what I call small places. So I will be looking at my notes, and I apologize for that, but I want to make sure that I get everything in those 20 seconds. So my pleasure to talk to you about courage in small places. So here is a map of Bermuda. We are a small place, 21 square miles, 64,000 people. Bermudians are gentle souls, a social people, yet they are frightened, broken, eager, excited, and concerned all at the same time. We are also considered a fishbowl of a society. We can see happy people, sad people, wealthy people, poor people, abused people, homeless people, and sometimes even nurtured people. We can see most things and always have something to say about what we see. And then there are the unspoken times when we don't talk about what we see, where we hide the difficulties. We must look like we're doing well. We can't be the family that tells the story of the hurt. Underneath the surface are hidden objects of shame and difficulty, not to be spoken of, as if we can hide it forever. So what happens when we are fearful and really don't pay attention? The college-bound student no longer has an interest in studying law or going away to school. Increases in poverty and homelessness are the casualties of fear and the results of not doing the right thing for people. And so how do we move mountains in small places where people are stuck and afraid? What does it take to move us beyond fear and concern towards hope, passion, and resolve? What frightening experience keeps us stuck and immobile? What historical fears gives us permission to let vulnerable people struggle? At some point, we will have to address the hurt and the difficulty. It does not stay hidden. When the tide goes out, we can see who's been swimming naked. We can tell where the hurt lies, and we are forced to address the hurt. Harriet Tubman said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more only if they knew they were slaves." How do we truly know if we are enslaved by our behaviors? How do we become more self-aware of the prison that we have unintentionally put ourselves in? Perspective. A definition of perspective is point of view, standpoint, frame of reference, approach, interpretation. How often do we consider our frame of reference? Do you know what frames your behaviors and what drives your fears? What might give you more courage? Courage in small places is overcoming fear in places that are difficult in order to do the right thing that is of true value and that tends to be very freeing. Courage in small places means removing the barriers that keep abused children, uneducated people, traumatized families in generational tailspins. Those families need our courage. And courage is a love affair with the unknown. And we go into the unknown when mom is more Susie's friend than her parent due to fear of losing relationship with Susie, when individuals settle for unfair practices and unethical behaviors. And so we need to ponder these things, spending the time considering where to find our courage, which is desperately seeking us, choosing the rocks of humility, relevance, value, honesty, passion for doing the right thing in small places, harvesting faith and hope. And so the question is, can we come outside of ourselves and get perspective? I sometimes wonder if our mental boxes are too filled with fear and concern and limitation and bad experiences, and where might we find the freedom? Can we be daring? Do you believe in achieving the impossible? I do. I have come to learn that the impossible is simply someone's version of what is not possible from their point of view, from their vantage point, from their experience, from their standing point. But I don't know about you, but I'm looking for the experience of the person who has done the impossible. We all know that to overcome the barriers to the impossible is no easy task, but the fact that it has been done also proves that it can be done. The key is removing the barriers, and fear is usually the culprit. Finding the courage to speak up is a tool to overcome the barrier of fear. And let's be honest, being courageous is risky. You may lose friends, be an outcast from family, you may even lose your job. Knowing where you are going and why often helps to ease the burden. It may be a rough road to travel, but being sure of your destination will help. That destination may only be as far away from here as possible, but it will be meaningful to you, and not having the courage to go may simply not be an option. Positive relationships are forged when we are honest, upfront, willing to be vulnerable, and not afraid to do the right thing. And children need to see our example. A bird sitting in a tree is not afraid of the branch breaking because her trust is not in the branch, but in her own wings. As a bird strengthens its wings to fly, it naturally just flies. Our strength in being courageous is about building up our own capacity to fly. And we may not immediately feel the support and respect of others, but we must value the peace we gain within ourselves. We say yes to doing something meaningful because we understand what that yes means for us and for others. And we can expect to have a helping hand even though we may not know where that helping hand comes from. So I believe that every individual deserves to feel the joy of self-fulfillment, self-actualization, self-renewal, dignity. And I certainly believe that every child deserves it. It's something that I think about often, and I believe for our children's future world and for Bermuda to be another world, we must overcome the barriers to being courageous in small places. Thank you.
Ways we can make change, or small changes we can make for our small place.
So the question is, since you want to record it for the video, is that do I have an answer for or some examples of where we can make some small changes? And I call this courage in small places because Bermuda is a small place. And if I had more than 20 seconds, I would have given a few more examples. However, I think about when parents allow children to have alcohol at 16-year-old parties because they don't want to be seen as the uncool parent. Okay? If we think about all the things that parents do that they're afraid not to do, that's the courage we need in small places. Today I've seen tons of people at the feeding, Grateful Bread feeding environment, and we're getting a growing number of homeless. And there are people who are standing up courageously and saying, as a country and a community, we have to do something. And it's easier for us in our busy lives to just walk away and not. But I guarantee you, the homeless situation will be taken care of if 30% of the people said something. If the gang problem was dealt with by 30% of the people, it would be taken care of. If in our public education system, enough parents in that system, particularly those who are in this system, stood up and said, this isn't right. I may not be doing my part, but you're not either. That's the courage that I'm looking for in small places, places where we are concerned about being humiliated because we speak up. And unfortunately, we get that in Bermuda. So those are little ways you can do it in your community, or you certainly can do it within your family and not be afraid to say things to your children and think about that you will actually maintain the relationship with them rather than lose the relationship, because we all know that when children get older, they respect the things that parents told them when they were younger that actually saved them from harm or consequences. So those are some of the things.
Another random activity.
Okay, I have a question. So I know, oh, thank you for the microphone. So I know that you're the executive director of Family Center, And Family Center has a conference coming up on adverse childhood experiences. And one of those days, the first day of the conference, is a topic that takes some courage to talk about. And I know it's about understanding and addressing racial trauma. So could you share a little bit more about, like, you know, why you feel this topic needs to be addressed in Bermuda?
You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Because you know that's a loaded question, but at the end of the day, she's right. Family Center has a 2-day conference dealing with understanding racial trauma on the first day, and the second day, understanding the economics of ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And much of what I talked about is because of unaddressed trauma and adverse childhood experiences. So your wonderful question, Hannah, is how can we be courageous to talk about racial trauma, particularly when we believe that many people tend to make people feel guilty, etc. I have to say to you that one of the reasons Family Center is going into this space and dealing with racial trauma is because it is a type of trauma that we're dealing with some of our clients. But we have found a wonderful gentleman whose name is Dr. Kenneth Hardy, who's coming, who has a beautiful way of making it a healing environment rather than a guilty environment. And so the best way I think that I can suggest that we deal with racial trauma is be willing to be vulnerable in that space, to acknowledge that people and validate that people have had horrific experiences. And I'm going to encourage a certain segment of our population to not take it on your head that, oh my God, this is all about my race, because it is absolutely not. I truly believe it's about a mentality that oppresses others. And so a way to address it is to recognize that it's been a problem, validate it as a problem for people, and to figure out a way that we can go forward. And I guarantee you it will be a healing environment rather than one of those environments that's full of guilt. I hope that answers your question. That's June 13th and 14th, our 2-day conference.
Hi. Good evening. A quick question. When you speak of adverse childhood experiences, I've been doing some work with seniors, and people don't realize that you can carry that all the way. You could be 80 years old, and it could still affect you. That's how serious it is. I don't know, can you add anything to that in terms of it going all the way through your whole life?
Well, the first thing I want to say to that, particularly because I'm sure more people need to come up here, is that I'm going to encourage people to come to our conference, particularly the first day, which is cheaper. It's at HSBC. And there will be this opportunity to answer some of those questions about dealing with trauma. But at the end of the day, we all know that if you have issues that are untreated, they will stay with you until they are treated. And so certainly seniors, and you know, seniors, unfortunately, to a certain degree, you know, they've lived enough years that they've figured out a way to cover them over. But if they ever find themselves in conditions of low economic income, any harsh conditions will bring out that untreated trauma. And that's what we're seeing all throughout our community right now. And it tells us that there's lots of trauma. So I'm encouraging people really to come to that conference and learn about adverse childhood experiences, because we are doing a survey in Bermuda as we speak. And if you want to take the survey, call Stephanie Guthrie at the Family Center to find out what people's experiences were from 0 to 18 on this island, so we can have all that data to show what the level of trauma, untreated trauma, is in Bermuda. So I'm really encouraging people to come to the conference, even though I didn't mean to make a commercial here.
Thank you, Marta.